please all rise for the Philippine National Anthem.
Ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, telas ng sinakanan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa mandulupin, di ka pasisigil, sa nagagang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinatang tulad, awit sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nagtitindig. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magtitindig. Luman ang araw ng walhabing pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya ng pagkay mga aking, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please be seated. Guests from the government, the business sector, members of the diplomatic corps, development partners, the academe, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2022 Philippine Economic Briefing. I am Alfredo Bendijo.
A pleasant day to all of you. I am Diane Querer, and we are very pleased to be your host for this year's economic briefing. Because of the pandemic, it has been more than 2 years since we had the last face-to-face briefing, and it's indeed a pleasure to see that somehow we are going back to normal by having face-to-face conferences like this. Don't you agree, Aldo?
Yes, Diane, and it definitely feels good to host in front of such a big audience today after a long time. And we can feel the optimism, right, of everyone here. Yes, we are emerging stronger and better. Our theme for this year's briefing is 6 years of institutionalizing game-changing reforms and shaping the new economy, the Philippine Economic Report. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we will provide an overview of the Duterte Administration's groundbreaking reforms and milestones in advancing the country's economic development the past 6 years. Moreover, you will be hearing updates this morning on the government's initiatives to accelerate recovery amid the new normal.
For everyone's information as well, this is a back-to-back event with Sulong Pilipinas, which is a consultative workshop that has resulted in the Duterte administration's delivery of a majority of the top actionable recommendations received directly from Filipino citizens, particularly the business sector.
And we would also like to inform everyone that this morning's event is live streamed on the Facebook pages of RTVM, Radio Television Malacanang, the Department of Finance, DOF, and the Bangko Sentral, Pilipinas FB main page with Filipino, Cebuano, and Ilocano translations on BSP Filipino, BSP Cebuano, and BSP Ilocano FB pages, respectively. And we also have a sign language interpretation. And now, to formally open our program, may we call on stage Executive Secretary Salvador C. Medialdea for his opening remarks. Sir.
Secretary of Finance Carlos G. Dominguez, Governor of Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Benjamin E. Jokno, members of the Diplomatic Corps, fellow civil servants, partners from the private sector, and civil society organization who are here with us physically and online, friends from media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me start this event by conveying President Rodrigo Roa Duterte's deep gratitude to our partners from the business, youth, civil society, and the international community who have consistently engaged with the national government in shaping and supporting the President's socioeconomic reform agenda. Over the past 6 years, the Duterte administration has implemented game-changing reforms to relentlessly pursue inclusive economic growth, which is not only measured by statistics, but can be seen, touched, and felt by the Filipino people. We chose the theme 6 years of institutionalizing game-changing reforms and shaping the new economy because it highlights some of the key socioeconomic advances made during President Duterte's term of office on behalf of the Filipino people. These reforms not only benefit our people today, but also set the foundations for more resilient and sustainable growth and broadly shared prosperity. The pandemic disrupted the Philippines' accelerated path to upper middle income status, but we are confident that the disruption is only temporary. We were able to withstand this test to our fiscal stability due in large part to the reforms we had worked hard to implement long before the pandemic hit us. Even before assuming office, President Duterte announced a bold 0 to 10-point socioeconomic agenda that subsequently increased the net take-home pay of workers, lowered the taxes of corporations, rationalized the fiscal incentive system, increased the Philippines' competitiveness, promoted financial inclusion and digitalization, and improved the ease of doing business in the country. Through our joint efforts, we will continue to build a market-friendly policy environment that reflects the shared vision and aspirations of the business, youth, and civil society sectors. While many challenges remain, I am confident that we have shaped a better future for our economy and our people. The Duterte administration will continue to work toward a smooth transition and leave public office with stronger foundations in place for inclusive and sustainable economic growth. I am eager to hear from my fellow public servants who will discuss key areas of development. Finance Secretary Carlos G. Dominguez will provide updates on the fiscal performance of the country, and BSP Governor Benjamin Jokno will present the latest developments in the country's monetary, external, and financial sectors. We look forward to a meaningful and productive day with everyone. Let us begin.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary Salvador C. Medialdea. As what have been mentioned by the good Secretary Salvador Medialdea, the Duterte administration has implemented for the past 6 years game-changing reforms that aim towards economic growth that is felt by ordinary Filipinos. And speaking about game-changing reforms, ladies and gentlemen, to provide now updates from the Economic Development Cluster, please welcome the head of the government's economic team, Secretary Carlos G. Dominguez of Department of Finance.
My fellow colleagues in the Cabinet, led by Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea, Bangko Sentral Governor Benjamin Diokno, members of the Diplomatic Corps, our reliable bilateral and multilateral partners, business leaders, analysts, investors, economists, fellow workers in government, and friends from the media here and abroad, good morning. Years from now, when the Philippines brings down its poverty incidence to single digits, we will look back to the Duterte presidency as the moment when the country made the turn towards more inclusive growth and prosperity. When President Rodrigo Duterte took office in 2016, he adopted a bold 0 to 10-point socioeconomic agenda proposed by various stakeholders who participated in our first ever Sulong Pilipinas. 5.5 years later, we delivered 90% of this ambitious reform program. Under President Duterte's term, the Philippines made the decisive shift from an inward-looking economy to one ready to compete with the rest of the world. Many reform measures that languished for decades on the shelves of Congress were finally enacted into law. I have to thank everyone who contributed to these successes: our legislators, our friends in the private sector, our reliable development partners, and my colleagues in Cabinet, guided by Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea. We took a significant step towards lasting peace with the establishment of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. The administration also maintained an unrelenting campaign against criminality and terrorism. The peace and order we now enjoy must be credited to the work of our Security, Peace, and Defense team, led by Secretary Delfin Lorenzana, Secretary Eduardo Año, Secretary Hermogenes Esperon Jr., and Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. The enactment of the Ease of Doing Business Act paved the way for improved and efficient delivery of public services. I commend the Department of Trade and Industry, led by Secretary Ramon Lopez, here in front of us, for the efficient implementation of this law, which remarkably increased the competitiveness of the country's business climate. We enacted the Philippine Identification System Act, which brings us closer to the goal of achieving e-governance and greater financial inclusion among our people. The National Economic and Development Authority, led by Secretary Carl Chua, has been working tirelessly to accelerate the rollout of this program and immediately reach as many Filipinos as possible. As of March 23 of this year, a total of 61.3 million individuals nationwide have registered for the national ID. Through this program, the Land Bank of the Philippines has cleared the way for 7.7 million formerly unbanked registrants to be part of the formal banking system. In addition, we fulfilled President Duterte's promise of establishing a bank dedicated to the needs of Filipinos working abroad. The Overseas Filipino Bank is our first branchless, digital-only bank in the country. It now serves overseas Filipinos in 116 countries. To further accelerate financial inclusion and broaden the capital markets, the Bureau of Treasury introduced innovative government securities for small individual investors that can be purchased through digital channels. We also finally implemented the long-dormant Real Estate Investment Trust Act, which has become a powerful financial instrument for the property development sector and small investors. In just 2 years of implementation, the total market capitalization size of the REITs in the country already reached 269.7 billion pesos. Meanwhile, the rice tariffication law was finally achieved after more than 30 years of failed attempts under previous administrations. The law opened up the Philippine rice market and in turn lowered the price of our country's staple food for more than 100 million Filipinos. As a result, rice is no longer the main contributor to our overall inflation rate. The rice tariffication law ensures that farmers benefit directly by providing at least 10 billion pesos each year for mechanization, high-quality seeds, access to credit, and training. Before the law was passed in 2019, the National Food Authority regulated all rice imports, and it was the chief importer of the grain. It received an average of 11 billion pesos a year in tax subsidies. With the rice tariffication, the government has already earned a total of 46.6 billion pesos in rice import tariffs during the first 3 years of implementation. These revenues support the reform and modernization of our agriculture sector. This is a complete reversal of the 11 billion pesos annual average tax subsidies the government provided to NFA every year from 2005 to 2018. The rice tariffication law is just one of the progressive efforts undertaken by the Department of Agriculture, led by Secretary Willie Dar, who's here, to build productivity and enhance the resiliency of our agriculture sector. The Duterte administration decisively passed and implemented the most comprehensive tax reform program ever in this country. This provided robust and recurring revenues that helped expand social services and supported our massive economic investments in modern infrastructure. I would like to point out, however, that the success of the tax reform measures cannot be attributed exclusively to the current efforts. This is the logical continuation of decades of reforms arduously passed by previous administrations. TRAIN, or the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion Act, reduced personal income taxes for 99% of our taxpayers, giving them much-needed relief after 20 years of non-adjustment. Through TRAIN, we have basically given out a 14-month pay every year to our wage earners. Under the law, we imposed excise taxes on sweetened beverages, for which we collect almost 104 million pesos a day. TRAIN likewise mandated the implementation of our first ever nationwide fuel marking program to curb oil smuggling. No past administration increased sin taxes more than once. President Duterte and Congress raised sin taxes 3 times within his term. The excise taxes on tobacco and alcohol products improved funding for the Universal Health Care Program. All in all, TRAIN and other enacted packages of tax reform program enabled the government to raise 504.6 billion pesos in incremental revenues during the first 4 years of implementation. In addition to modernizing our tax policies, the Duterte administration aggressively pushed for the full digitalization of the Bureau of Internal Revenue and the Bureau of Customs. In 2015, only 10% of the country's taxpayers filed their income tax returns online. In 2021, this grew to 99.5%. From the 1.9 million electronic payment transactions made with the Bureau of Internal Revenue in 2015, this number rose to 5.5 million electronic payment transactions last year. These figures are projected to dramatically increase in the coming years as we introduce more digitalization initiatives. Meanwhile, our policy of instilling fiscal discipline among our GOCCs, or government-owned and controlled corporations, allowed us to collect an average of 68.7 billion pesos annually from these firms since we took office. This is more than double the annual average collection of the past administration. Through the bold tax reforms and better tax administration, we were able to raise our revenue efforts to 16.1% of GDP in 2019 from 15.1% in 2015. This was our best performance in more than 2 decades. In 2019, our debt to GDP ratio was at historic low of 39.6% from 42.7% in 2015. The international credit rating agencies recognized us by giving us the best credit ratings ever, ranging from BBB plus to a AAA. As a result, we were able to bring down our borrowing costs and raise bond issuance with very tight spreads in the international market. This high credit rating also spilled over in the low borrowing costs for the private sector. Our Samurai, Panda, Euro, and dollar bonds were all met with strong demand, illustrating the high level of confidence of the international investors in the Philippines. Our robust revenue flow and concessional financing allowed us to sustainably fund the Build, Build, Build program, which is one of the lasting legacies of President Duterte. This administration was able to raise infrastructure spending to above 5% of GDP, double the level recorded by the previous 4 administrations. This would not have been possible without the hard work of our infrastructure implementing agencies, led by Secretary Arthur Tugade, former Secretary Mark Villar, Secretary Vince Dizon, and Acting Secretary Roger Mercado. The Philippine railway system is illustrative. After many decades of neglect, the company had only 77 kilometers of rail service by the time the Duterte administration took office. Today, we have 1,209 kilometers of rail service. From only 61 operational stations, this will increase to 208 by the end of this year. In 2016, we had only 224 operational train cars. This has now increased to 1,386. Life is now more comfortable as the Filipinos can now travel more conveniently with an increasingly expansive and efficient railway system. Our fiscal discipline encouraged our development partners to support infrastructure through concessional loans and grants. Since we took office, we sealed 28 highly concessional loan agreements for our flagship infrastructure projects. This includes the country's most ambitious infrastructure undertaking, the Metro Manila Subway Project. With the generous support of Japan, what has once been considered a dream subway is now about to become a reality. Apart from infrastructure, the Duterte administration also invested heavily in social services to boost human capital development. We provided healthcare coverage, housing, unconditional cash transfers, quality jobs, free education in state colleges and universities, and free irrigation water. These programs were all efficiently carried out by the implementing agencies led by Secretaries Leonor Briones, Secretary Rolando Joselito Bautista, Secretary Francisco Duque, Secretary Eduardo Del Rosario, Secretary Silvestre Bello III, and Secretary Bernadette Puyat, and National Irrigation Administrator Ricardo Visaya. I also have to thank the Department of the Budget and Management, first led by Ben Jokno and now led by Officer in Charge Tina Kanda, for ensuring the equitable, prudent, transparent, and accountable allocation and use of public funds for these social services and infrastructure projects. To better serve the needs of the Filipino people, the Duterte administration has infused the largest amount of capital into the Land Bank of the Philippines and the Development Bank of the Philippines compared with the combined amounts under all past administrations. When we assumed office, Land Bank had only 88.7 billion pesos in capital, while DBP had 37.9 billion pesos. By the end of April 2022, Land Bank's capital will now be 230.4 billion pesos, making it the second largest universal bank in the country. DBP's capital will now be 76.9 billion pesos. In particular, Land Bank's image as a big rural bank is far in the rearview mirror. The robust capital infusion reinforced Land Bank's financial strength and allowed it to be an effective partner of the government in advancing its development agenda. The capital is being prudently managed and used to finance projects that are needed by the country, not just in the agriculture sector. Land Bank is also the biggest lender to local government units. Other sectors being supported by the bank include healthcare, education, power generation and distribution, water transportation and housing, all led by the private sector. These game-changing measures and programs made the Philippines one of the economic leaders in the region, growing over 6% annually. The same reforms helped us gain the financial strength to weather the worst of the COVID-19 crisis. Had we not pursued them on time, the impact of the pandemic would have been worse. Our 2020 GDP would have plunged deeper by 13.3% instead of 9.6%. This just only proves that in any battle or emergency, preparation is always the best strategy. When COVID-19 struck, the Duterte administration moved quickly to protect Filipino lives. The Philippines' direct response to the COVID-19 crisis so far amounted to 3 trillion pesos, equivalent to 15.6% of our GDP. Funding our social protection and economic stimulus measures has been a challenge. But the pandemic found us in a strong financial and fiscal position, ready to protect our citizens. The government collected lower revenues due to the lockdown that slowed down economic activity. At the same time, we needed more money to fund the unexpected cost of the pandemic. Fortunately, we had the fiscal headroom to temporarily increase our deficit to GDP ratio from 3.4% in 2019 to 7.6% in 2020 and 8.6% in 2021. We had set out a clear strategy for financing our deficit. We prioritized domestic borrowings, followed by official development assistance, and then, and last, the international capital markets. We determined this plan as the most prudent approach, ensuring sustainability in our debt service. Meanwhile, majority of our budget to procure COVID-19 vaccines for our people was sourced from multilateral banks. We were able to bring together the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank under a joint financing arrangement for the purchase of these life-saving doses. This was the first in the Asia-Pacific region and probably in the world. Our debt-to-GDP ratio increased from a historic low of 39.6% in 2019 to 54.6% in 2020 and 60.5% in 2021. Nevertheless, this ratio remains eminently manageable. The fact that the Philippines was able to maintain all its historic high credit ratings throughout the crisis amidst downgrades among our peers is a testament to our excellent record of prudent spending and fiscal discipline. The disruption brought about by the pandemic is only temporary. Supported by the rebound of revenue collections, our deficit and borrowings will begin to decline for the year. For instance, the national government has started reducing our provisional advance arrangements with the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas from 540 billion pesos to 300 billion pesos. This amount will be totally paid off by June 12 of this year. As the pandemic subsides, the Philippine economy is now well on its way to rapid recovery. Our risk management strategy culminated in a full-year growth of 5.6% in 2021, exceeding target and market expectations. This year, we expect our economy to grow by 7 to 9%. COVID-19 cases are subsiding rapidly, while our vaccination program is proceeding apace. Last year, our revenue collection was already 5% higher than in 2020, signaling a return to robust economic activity. This year, we expect to bring back our revenue collections to pre-pandemic levels. Our merchandise trade and remittances are already above pre-pandemic levels. The Duterte administration marked its final full year with an all-time high record of foreign direct investments amounting to $10.5 billion US. We also continued to gain ground in reducing unemployment. Even as the world has been hard hit by the pandemic, our hard-won reforms bolstered our country's ability to recover and rebuild. The enactment of the CREATE, or the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, and amendments to the Retail Trade Liberalization Act, Public Service Act, and the Foreign Investment Act will bring in the high-value investments that our country needs to upskill our workforce and further modernize our economy. Our optimism is, of course, tempered by the uncertainties introduced by the Ukraine conflict. We face a situation that will almost certainly raise inflation levels in all countries. This will be due primarily to the spike in oil and commodity prices. Rest assured, the Duterte administration is closely monitoring developments and is doing its utmost to mitigate the impact of oil and food price increases on our people. This is being done through cash grants for the bottom 50% of the population, as well as fuel subsidy and fuel discount programs for the transportation sector and small farmers and fisherfolk. The election season, on the other hand, will not be an issue. We have a long history of orderly and peaceful transfers of powers. The next administration will inherit many hard-won reforms. They will enter the office with the basic groundwork for rapid growth already in place. We will also transition to them a comprehensive fiscal consolidation plan to bring the economy back to its high growth trajectory. Together, we have to create an economy that can provide sufficient taxes so the government can provide the necessary public goods for the continued prosperity of the Filipino people. Our fiscal consolidation plan will help us achieve this. Rest assured, the Duterte administration will redouble its effort to grow the economy faster in its remaining months in office to fully recover our lost opportunities. We will continue to drive up domestic economic activity by proceeding full steam with our massive Build, Build, Build infrastructure program. Infrastructure investments as a percentage of GDP are targeted to reach 5.9% this year. We will continue modernizing our governance system, strengthening our public health capacity, and investing more in our human capital. We will pursue more reforms that will build a truly broad-based and inclusive financial system fit for the 21st century. We will be more active in implementing climate change actions on the ground. In essence, we will continue working hard until the last hour of our mandate to contribute all that we can to our strong economic resurgence. I would like to end my talk with a famous phrase in Japanese naval history attributed to Admiral Heihachiro Togo. The weather today is fine, but the waves are high. The Philippine economy, our ship, has indeed been sailing through fine weather, but the waves of uncertainty remain owing to external developments. No one expected the pandemic. No country was fully prepared for this public health crisis, but we have successfully managed it. However, the experts say other new variants and pandemics could still break out. The Philippine economy is now recovering strongly, but we have to deal with the volatilities produced by the Ukraine conflict. We must also strengthen the resilience of our communities as we face difficulties proposed by climate change. In our highly integrated world, external events could easily break and imperil our prospects. We have sailed through fine and rough weather, but President Duterte has proven to be a strong and steady captain of the ship. The waves may be high, but the ship of state has been masterfully steered. Thank you.
When the Duterte administration assumed office in 2016, it pursued an ambitious socio-economic reform agenda that secured for the Filipino people some of the boldest and urgently needed economic and fiscal policies that have been held back for decades. Game-changing reforms were pursued to achieve a stronger and more inclusive economy. For too long, many Filipinos could not avail of basic services due to the lack of proper identification. With inclusivity as a top priority of his administration, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte signed into law the Philippine Identification System, or PhilSys Act, in August 2018. Mass registration began in October 2020, with over 60 million Filipinos from 86 provinces registered as of March 2022.
Despite the challenges brought about by the pandemic, we accelerated the registration of the Philippine National ID to give every Filipino a unique and digitalized proof of identity. This will enhance the delivery of government services and promote financial inclusion and digitalization, giving more Filipinos access to opportunities that were previously out of their reach.
In December 2017, President Duterte enacted the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion, or the TRAIN Law. The law reduced personal income taxes for 99% of Filipino workers, giving them much-needed relief after 20 years of non-adjustment in their tax rates. TRAIN also imposed higher taxes on unhealthy or so-called sin products, thus increasing revenues to fund government social services and infrastructure projects.
Narinig ko nga nung sinabi ng boss ko na napirmahan ng Pangulong Duterte ang train law, talagang nagdiwang kami ng pamilya ko kasi yung 3,000 to 4,000 na nawawala sa akin, nakukuha ko na siya, nag-take home ko na siya. Nakatulong talaga. Hindi lang yata sa amin, pati sa lahat ng Pilipino.
The rice tariffication is a landmark law that reforms the country's previous dysfunctional rice policy. This was finally achieved after more than 30 years of failed attempts under previous administrations. By allowing the free market to operate, we have significantly increased the supply of rice in the country, and consumers now have wider choices of rice varieties. As a result, rice prices have gone down dramatically from the levels we saw in 2018. Rice price is no longer the main contributor to our overall inflation rate. The tariffs collected from rice importers are earmarked for agricultural modernization programs that directly benefit our farmers.
Red tape has been a common complaint among businesses, often cited among the leading factors that hindered investments. To address this long-standing issue, the Ease of Doing Business Act was signed into law by President Duterte in May 2018. The law streamlines and automates procedures in securing business permits and stipulates maximum processing times for government transactions. The Philippines used to have the highest corporate income tax rate in Southeast Asia. Then came the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises, or CREATE Act. With CREATE, the country's corporate income tax rate fell toward the regional average, making the Philippines a more attractive investment destination. CREATE also rationalized the country's problematic fiscal incentive system. Now, tax incentives are performance-based, time-bound, targeted, and transparent. A more efficient incentive system will enable the government to generate more revenues for various development programs.
Over the past 6 years, key reforms were put in place that demonstrated how the administration prioritized the needs of businesses to bring about a healthy economy for the people.
The Duterte administration also implemented a series of sin tax reforms to fund the Universal Healthcare Program. The Duterte administration is the only government in Philippine history that increased excise taxes on sin products 3 times within one presidential term. With all game-changing tax reforms, the government generated more revenues and improved the government's finances. Better finances allowed the government to decisively respond to the COVID-19 crisis while continuing to invest in massive infrastructure projects for post-pandemic economic recovery. All of these were done within the boundaries of fiscal discipline, thus helping the Philippines keep its investment-grade credit ratings even as the world saw a wave of credit rating downgrades throughout the COVID-19 crisis. The Philippines used to underinvest in infrastructure. As a result, the country has had to contend with heavy traffic, poor market access, as well as low investment and low tourist arrivals. In response, President Duterte's Build, Build, Build program ushered in the country's golden age of infrastructure. The current administration's investments in roads, mass transport systems, irrigation and flood control facilities, airports and seaports is twice the average annual spending made by the past 2 administrations combined.
Metro Manila is bursting at the seams. The traffic problem is unquestionable, as economic costs are pegged at 3.5 billion pesos or roughly $72.17 million US. On top of building new roads, we need to develop new cities where people can live and work and where business can thrive. New Clark City, a resilient and green city, is intended to be a place where people will find everything they need: residential spaces, business spaces, a government complex that will house offices of various agencies, a sports center, schools, hospital, and a lot more, an interconnected city with direct access to an international airport that will connect you to the rest of the world.
The Philippines is blessed with a highly diverse array of tourist attractions and spots. But without the necessary infrastructure, many of these places would be out of reach to our travelers. Thanks to Build, 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 numerous airports, seaports, bridges, and thousands of kilometers of roads have been built or upgraded to make tourist journeys around the country safe, convenient, and fun.
The country's tourism and beautiful destinations are now more than ever easily accessible to local and foreign visitors. Over the past 6 years, we have constructed, developed, and rehabilitated numerous airport projects in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao so that the riding public could enjoy a more reliable and certainly more convenient travel experience. We have also upgraded many of our airports to have night flight capabilities, which means air travel to various Philippine destinations is now very possible even at sundown.
Build, build, build has been a big help to the country's agriculture and fisheries sector. The numerous projects of the infrastructure agencies, including farm-to-market roads, have complemented the programs of the Department of Agriculture in boosting food production in the country.
Policy reforms, massive infrastructure projects. All these are game-changing initiatives. The reform momentum continues even toward the end of the Duterte presidency. Additional vital economic reforms, backed by the president and his economic team, were recently passed by Congress. Amendments to the Retail Trade Liberalization Act, Foreign Investments Act, and Public Service Act. These reforms will further propel the Philippine economy in its next phases of economic development, consistent with the vision adopted 6 years ago.
The Build, Build, Build program is one of the lasting legacies of President Duterte. The unprecedented level of infrastructure investment was made possible by the tax reforms that have helped the government generate higher revenues over the years. Also, our high credit ratings brought about by the country's strong macroeconomic fundamentals have helped us source financing from domestic and international markets at very favorable terms. This has allowed us to fund massive infrastructure and human capital development projects. We created more employment opportunities and we strengthened the country's investment climate towards a robust, sustainable, and more inclusive economic growth. This is a testament to this administration's commitment to deliver on the promise of a better quality of life for the Filipino people.
And now to discuss the developments in the monetary, external, and financial sectors, let us call on stage Governor Benjamin E. Diokno of the Bangko Sentral.
Good morning to everyone joining us today here and online. It is my privilege to speak before you in today's Philippine economic briefing with the theme 6 years of institutionalizing game-changing reforms and shaping the economy. Over the past 6 years, we have achieved many accomplishments, but face a few serious challenges. In 2020, economies across the globe suffered severe downturns due to the coronavirus pandemic. And this year, just as we were adjusting to the new normal, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the global response present new challenges and uncertainty. But we are optimistic as we see clear signs of recovery. But for this morning, let me first discuss key developments in the BSP's focus areas over the last 6 years, then conclude with our outlook. The BSP remains committed to its mandate of maintaining price and financial stability and a safe, efficient, and inclusive payments and settlement system. At the same time, the BSP maintained a reform-oriented mindset. The COVID-19 pandemic did not deter us from pursuing rather game-changing reforms. In fact, the pandemic had proved to be a catalyst that accelerated many of our reforms, such as digitalization and sustainability in our financial system. On the monetary front, The BSP adopted the interest rate corridor framework in 2016 to strengthen the transmission of changes in monetary policy stance to the rest of the economy. In addition, the inclusion of BSP securities in standard monetary operations provided an additional instrument for managing liquidity in the financial system. In 2019, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte signed Republic Act number 11211, amending the BSP Charter. This granted the BSP the authority to issue its own debt securities. This law embodies measures to align the BSP's operations with international standards and global best practices, thus improving the BSP's corporate viability and enhancing its capability for crafting proactive policies, among others. Another key reform passed to address the impact of the pandemic is the Financial Institutions Transfer Act, or FIST Act. The FIST Act is a preemptive measure to ensure banking sector stability in case of significant spikes in loan defaults. The passage of Republic Act number 11439, or the Act providing for the regulation and organization of Islamic banks, marked an important milestone in the history of Islamic banking in the Philippines. Islamic finance will help attract funds from Islamic investors looking for opportunities to support infrastructure requirements, particularly in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. In line with our efforts to promote greater financial inclusion, the BSP introduced the Basic Deposit Accounts Framework. This enables the account holder to access a wide range of financial services, including savings, credit, insurance, investments, and remittances with limited requirements. As of the second quarter of 2021, the number of basic deposit account holders reached 7.4 million. This brings deposit account ownership to a total of 90.5 million Filipinos. The BSP launched the National Retail Payment System, or the NRPS, which promotes interoperability among payment service providers, allowing for efficient and seamless transactions. The NRPS is a safe, efficient, reliable, and an interoperable retail payment system, and is a critical enabler of our financial inclusion initiatives. The BSP launched the Digital Payments Transformation Roadmap in 2020-2023, charting strategies for an efficient, inclusive, safe, and secure digital payments ecosystem. The roadmap aims to convert at least half of the total volume of retail payments into digital form and onboard 70% of Filipino adults into the formal financial system using payment or transaction accounts by 2023. We are now seeing the fruits of our efforts to capitalize, or rather to digitalize, the country's payment system. As of end 2020, the share of monthly digital payments volume reached 20.1%, slightly exceeding the BSP's target of 20% in 2020, set in 2015. This indicates that the adoption of digital payments remains on track to reach at least 50% mark by 2023. The issuance of the Digital Banking Framework also aims to advance financial inclusion and the adoption and growth of digital financial services in the country. At the end of 2021, the BSP granted digital bank licenses to 6 financial institutions. This is expected to further accelerate the creation of e-money accounts. We also launched the Sustainable Central Banking Program, which aims to foster environmentally responsible and sustainable policies and work practices in our key functions and operations. The BSP also issued the Sustainable Finance Framework and the Environmental and Social Risk Management Framework. Sustainability is central to achieving the BSP's core mandates of maintaining price and financial stability given the potential impact of climate disasters on the supply of goods and services, as well as on incomes. As such, the BSP invested $550 million to date in the Green Bond Fund with the Bank for International Settlements. Against the backdrop of all these milestones and reforms, the Philippine economy remained strong. From 2016 to 2019, pre-pandemic, the Philippine economy expanded annually by 6 to 7%. However, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the economy contracted by 9.6% in 2020, following 21 years of uninterrupted growth. The economy rebounded strongly, growing at 12% in the second quarter of 2021 and has managed to sustain growth since then. With mobility restrictions easing, the economy is returning to pre-pandemic growth levels. In any case, the BSP pursued initiatives that supported the economy throughout the pandemic. First were measures to boost market confidence, such as cuts in the policy rate, to promote credit-taking activities, and reserve requirement to increase loanable funds. Second were extraordinary liquidity measures, such as provisional advances to the national government and remittance of dividends to the national government and purchases of government securities in the secondary market. So far, the BSP has infused over 2.2 trillion pesos into the financial system. That's equivalent to about 11.1% of GDP. Third were regulatory and operational relief measures to maintain stability of the financial system and ensure public access to financial services. The Philippines' long history of implementing critical structural reforms strengthened the economy's resilience to face the challenges of the pandemic. Despite the impact of the pandemic on the economy, credit rating agencies have maintained the Philippines' investment-grade ratings amid a wave of negative rating actions globally. This shows confidence in the whole of government efforts, including BSP's response measures towards recovery from the COVID-19 crisis and a better post-COVID Philippine economy. Moving on to key developments in the monetary, external, and banking sectors during the periods 2016-2021, the BSP has been able to keep inflation low and stable. Manageable inflation provided an enabling environment for growth. From January to March this year, headline inflation stood at 3.4%, well within the target range of 2 to 4%. While upside risk exists, including shortages in domestic pork and fish supply, as well as from potential impact of the higher oil prices on transport fares, average inflation is projected to settle within the target band in 2023. Meanwhile, the country's strong external position continued to be a key credit strength, inspiring investor confidence. Remittances from overseas Filipinos registered a 5.1% growth in 2021. At the height of the pandemic in 2020, they only contracted by less than 1%. The BPO industry remains a steady source of foreign exchange. BPO receipts in 2021 grew by 9.5%. In 2021, net foreign direct investment inflows increased by 54.2% to $10.5 billion US dollars. As of February 2022, the gross international reserves stood at 108 billion US dollars, which continue to provide a liquidity buffer equivalent to 9.5 months' worth of imports of goods and payments of services and primary income. As bank regulator, the BSP ensures that the Philippine banking system is sound and stable. Indicators show the continued growth of assets, deposits, and capital, as well as net profit and liquidity buffers. Banks have ample loan loss reserves and unmanageable loan quality. This allowed the banking system to support the economy. Bank credit grew 7 consecutive months since August 2021, reaching 8.8% last February, reflecting expansion in business activity. This supports the view of an even stronger economic rebound this year. Now let me briefly touch on our economic outlook and the BSP's policy normalization strategy. The government expects economic growth to accelerate to a range of 7 to 9% this year and 6 to 7% next year. There are strong bases for this optimistic outlook. Growth will be supported by the implementation of the 2022 national budget, the Build program, the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Law, and Executive Order number 166, adopting the 10-point policy agenda to accelerate and sustain economic recovery from the pandemic. Moreover, game-changing legislation, such as the amended Public Services Act, will drive economic growth moving forward. This economic outlook is supported in parts by the BSP's efforts towards financial digitalization and inclusion and promotion of a stable inflation and financial environment conducive to economic growth. However, the favorable economic outlook comes with risk. One of the key risks to domestic and global economic growth is the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Its direct impact is inconsequential, yet its indirect impact through higher world oil prices and slower global growth could be significant. The BSP supports the national government's fiscal interventions to address risks to inflation and maintain the economic recovery momentum. As the Philippine economy recovers, the BSP's exit strategy involves recalibration of monetary operations, unwinding of liquidity provision, reducing monetary accommodation, and building our buffers in preparation for future crises. We will continue to assess demand and supply conditions to ensure that we are able to implement our exit strategy in a timely and orderly manner. We will strive to strike the right balance between providing support to the economy on the one hand and fulfilling our mandates of price and financial stability on the other. Further, the BSP supports policies and measures that will foster both the attainment of its mandates and post-pandemic economic recovery, including the institutionalization of policy reforms to address supply constraints of major commodities to help temper threats of domestic price stability. The enactment of the Financial Consumer Protection Act to improve the quality of financial services and contribute to greater financial inclusion, and promotion of digital payments under the Digital Payments Act, which will encourage the universal use of safe and efficient digital payments. Let me end with my talk with the Chinese proverb, which says, When the winds of change blow, some people build walls, others build windmills. The reforms that we have instituted are the results of our openness to embrace new things and our courage to deal with the challenges of our times. The past 6 years tested our resilience as a nation, but we are emerging better and stronger because we opted to build windmills that have harnessed the winds of opportunity. We searched for solutions and acted boldly in the face of difficult situations. Moving forward, we will continue to transform challenges into opportunities for improving the life of every Filipino. Thank you once more, and mabuhay.
Stable prices, easy access to credit, making safe and convenient payments. These are shared concerns of millions of Filipinos. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the national government strive to make improvements in these areas toward a new and more resilient economy.
I believe Bangko Sentral has done a consistently remarkable job in very challenging times globally. They have kept to a flexible monetary policy, reducing interest rates in a timely and proactive manner to protect economic growth, and increasing interest rates to contain inflationary pressures when needed.
The BSP has done a great job in ensuring utmost transparency in its monetary policy in a preemptive and proactive manner, aligned with global best practices. So it doesn't come as a surprise that the BSP governor has been awarded as one of the best in the world. This has resulted to a greater order, stability, and certainty in the financial markets and in the economy, also leading to well-anchored inflation and inflation expectations.
We commend the government, particularly the Department of Finance and Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, for effectively using policy measures at its disposal to tame inflation. We laud the BSP for closely monitoring the inflation environment while continuing to ensure that interest rates remain low and loans granted to MSMEs were considered part of the bank's reserve requirements, even as we face the challenge of the pandemic. This has given the business community better confidence to move forward as the economy opens and recovers.
The national government, through agencies that support and develop agriculture, entrepreneurship, and industry, helps achieve price stability by addressing factors affecting the supply of goods and services. For instance, boosting food production, better policies that enhance logistics, and infrastructure development that speed up delivery of goods and services, as well as monitoring and law enforcement against unfair trade practices. These all help achieve price stability. With a whole-of-government approach to maintaining price stability, there is close coordination between the Bangko Sentral and government line agencies so that appropriate policies, whether for managing demand or supply, are in sync and in place.
Ngayon, nakita ko mas bumaba ang presyo ng bigas ngayon. So, malaking bagay ito para sa aming pamilya. At napakalaking bagay yung pinirmahan na batas ni Duterte na hindi lamang sa pamilya namin makakatulong, naniniwala ako na sa lahat ng pamilyang Pilipino.
In addition to liberalizing the rice sector, the Duterte administration has implemented various programs on food security, which helped maintain stability of food prices.
The Department of Agriculture launched the Plant program, otherwise known as the Ahon Lahat, Kain Sapat kontra sa COVID-19. Its main objective is to make food available, accessible, and affordable. We started urban agriculture at the start of 2019. This is in partnership with local government units. We built community gardens nationwide. Beneficiaries learned the basics of food production, and we provided seeds and other farming inputs including technical assistance, training, while LGUs provided the spaces for the gardens and oversaw sustainability of these projects.
At the same time, a number of measures were implemented to help maintain price stability amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
At the height of the COVID-19 crisis, the country grappled with lack of supply of PPEs, gloves, alcohol, and other pandemic essentials. To address the supply deficiency, the Department of Trade and Industry's Board of Investments assisted many manufacturers in repurposing their plants into facilities that produce these highly in-demand products. For instance, ready-to-wear apparel manufacturers, or RTW manufacturers, turned into PPE manufacturers. Makers of rubber balloons became makers of gloves. Manufacturers of alcoholic beverages became makers of disinfectants, and so on. BOI provided support, such as in the form of technical assistance and linkages with FDA, and also linking suppliers and manufacturers.
Supporting businesses is a government priority. With various types of assistance to enterprises, the government has helped augment the supply of much-needed goods and services, which also helps keep inflation manageable over the medium to long term. Credit access. In recent years, much has been done so that more Filipinos can avail of loans and other financial services more easily. A flagship program that will significantly boost credit access in the country is the Philippine Identification System, or PhilSys, also known as the National ID Program.
Bangko Sentral supports PICC. We have assumed the role of printing hard copies of the IDs, which also have an electronic version. This program squarely addresses the problem of lack of proper identification. With a national ID, many Filipinos will find it easier to open accounts and avail the services of banks and other formal financial service providers. We expect the country to post more milestones in financial inclusion.
Another initiative on improving credit access is the Credit Surety Fund, or CSF. Under this program, funds from state-owned firms, local government units, cooperatives, and other sources are pooled to provide guarantees to loans of micro-enterprises.
Ang CSF po ay nakatulong sa amin financially. Nakahiram po kami nung una ng 10 million. In-invest po namin yun sa additional capital namin. Tapos nag-invest po kami ng bakery, restaurant, at saka additional capital ng groceries namin. As of now, we have 5 million loan. Yun po yung ginamit namin sa pagpatayo ng building namin po sa Pampanga.
A law seeking to improve credit access was enacted. Under the Personal Property Security Act, properties other than real assets, such as inventories, crops, receivables, may serve as collateral for loans. This helps MSMEs access credit even if they do not own land or other real properties typically required by financial institutions as collateral for loans. Complementing this, the Bangko Sentral has put up a regulatory environment that promotes risk-based lending. Banks are encouraged to rely on a borrower's credit worthiness, determined by using credit scoring models rather than collateral. In December 2020, the Credit Risk Database project was launched. The Credit Risk Database is a repository of borrowers' information that will help generate credit scores for them. MSMEs that do not have real properties but have good credit scores will be able to access loans. With enabling policies on credit access, microloans have grown over the years, consistent with the goal of financial inclusion and an economy for all. Amid the COVID-19 crisis, there has been a whole-of-government approach in assisting MSMEs through access to financing. While the Bangko Sentral implemented time-bound regulations that encourage banks to lend more to MSMEs, other government agencies rolled out credit programs for small businesses.
Throughout the past 5 years, the government has been very proactive in supporting our MSMEs, which comprise 99% of businesses in the country and employ over 60% of our workforce. We are helping MSMEs prosper for the benefit of the Filipino people and the economy through the CREATE Act, various policy initiatives enhancing their credit access, and a wide range of financing programs extended by the government.
Sending remittances, paying bills, shopping online, transferring funds. Services that make these transactions convenient, fast, and safe are important to Filipinos. In recent years, the ways in which people and businesses make payments have been revolutionized through financial digitalization.
Nag-start po ako gumamit noong December dahil marami po ang nagtatanong kung accept po kami ng QR code payment. Kasi po, mas mabilis ang pagbabayad at hindi na kailangan magsusukli. Madami na pong gumagamit ng QR code sa ngayon dahil scan na lang po nila, bayad lang po sila at safe po ang kanilang pagbabayad. Very convenient po siya.
The Digital Payments Transformation Roadmap of the Bangko Sentral aims to achieve two overall targets by 2023. Number one, half of financial transactions in the country will be done digitally. And number two, at least 70% of Filipino adults will have transaction accounts. The rationale is simple. If payments can be made quickly, capital turnaround is faster and economic growth accelerates. Also, digitalization helps make financial products and services accessible to more people, thereby accelerating financial inclusion. Financial digitalization is promoted in various ways, from regulations that encourage the creation of digital banks and electronic money issuers, to interoperable systems that allow a customer to transfer funds from one bank to another electronically, to innovative programs that allow people to use QR codes for payments and allow people to save and invest for retirement using their mobile devices, to rules that strengthen cybersecurity so that consumers will trust electronic platforms. With all these initiatives, the Philippines is shifting from a cash-heavy to a cash-light and digital-heavy society. From only 1% in 2013, the share of digital financial transactions to total volume rose to over 20% in 2020. And from about 30% a few years back, the number of adult Filipinos with transaction accounts rose to over 50% in 2021. The Philippines is on track to achieving its 2023 goals. Other digitalization milestones have also been recorded. With less physical cash through financial digitalization, which also reduces the country's carbon footprint, we are supporting a more sustainable future. Over the past 6 years, concrete programs and policies have been put in place to achieve stable prices, improved credit access, and a better payment system, all of which are aimed toward helping realize our collective aspiration, a better quality of life for all Filipinos.
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the Philippine Economic Briefing. At this point, may we request the CUT Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea, please, to kindly proceed on stage for a group photo op. He will be joined by Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez, sir. And also would like to invite BSP Governor Ben Diokno. We'd also like to invite on stage Agriculture Secretary William Dar, sir. PCOO Secretary Martin Andanar. May we also invite DTI Secretary Ramon Lopez and Tourism Secretary Bernadette Romulo Puyat. Can we invite you, please, to be on stage for a group photo op?
We thank all the speakers for giving time to engage with our stakeholders. We also thank the audience for your keen interest to learn about updates on the Philippine economy. Please visit the Investor Relations Office IRO page on the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas website to download today's presentations. To those who will join Sulong Pilipinas, the program will start at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Please join us for lunch. Daghang kayong salamat. Thank you so much, Pilipinas. Padayon sa pag-uswag.
Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch.